Welcome to our book chat featuring Iris Mwanza, author of The Lion's Den, and Andie Davis, author of Let Me Liberate You, and our host, Wanjiru Koinange. Please give them a special Ake Festival welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we feeling? How was the morning? Excellent. I like that word. I like your energy, Mama. Hang on, let's get situated. My name is Wanjiru Koinange, as you've heard, and I am thrilled beyond measure to be having a conversation with authors of books that I've recently read and joyously savored and enjoyed. And we're already such fast friends because we were on email last night chatting about the fact that Andie's suitcase never arrived. And we're like, what do you need? Do you need makeup? Do you need accessories? We want to get you ready. So you're in for a treat. Before I start, round show of hands, how many people have read The Lion's Den by Iris? Okay, and how many people have read Let Me Liberate You? Okay, I'm not gonna promise there'll be no spoilers, but what I can promise is that the books are worth it, so please make a point to grab a copy after this session. Iris will be signing books. Unfortunately, Andie's books are not in the bookstore yet, but they will, Friday and Saturday. So she will be taking pre-orders. Please book your book. Go to the, cop it. So please, there'll be a list at the bookstore. If you want a copy, book it, and then as soon as they arrive, you can pay for it. Shall we get started?
Yes.
Okay, so let's begin by framing this conversation in the room, and I'll start with you, Iris. What does reclaiming truth mean to you?
Well, first I want to thank the organizers for having me. I am so excited and delighted. It's always a treat for me to come to Lagos. This is my third trip, and honestly, any excuse. So I love the energy of the city. I love the food. I love the people. It's just really fantastic to be here. And to be at the Ake Festival and talking about this really important topic, because right now, I live in the US right now. I'm from Zambia, but I live in the US. And it just feels like truth is so elusive. And it's so important not just to reclaim, but to stand up for the truth. There are so many lies. And in the US, it's coming from the top. And so it feels really much more critical. The stakes are higher. It's, in fact, oftentimes dangerous, not just in the US, but in other countries, depending on what you're talking about. And theoretically, we have freedom of speech, but the reality is truth is increasingly rare and increasingly important. And I think we just all have to figure out how we're going to be a little bit more courageous and how are we going to reclaim the truth. Because the truth doesn't change. The truth is there. No matter how many lies are spewed, the truth is not going to change.
Great answer, thank you. Andie, same question. What does reclaiming truth mean to you?
Thank you. Let me start also by just saying how delighted I am to be here representing the Caribbean contingent. I'm from Barbados. I know there was a Jamaican poet, Yamanika, who spoke earlier, and maybe there's some other Caribbean folks in the audience, but it's just a pleasure to be back home on the continent. This is my second time in Nigeria, and actually my second Ake. I first came, thank you, I came in 2019 just on my own as an audience member, and always said to myself, my dream would be that when my book is published, to make it to the Ake Festival. So this is truly, truly a dream come true. And it's an honor to speak with you, Wanjiru, and you, Iris. I'm so happy to be here. I agree very much with what you said, Iris, and I think also that you used a word that I think is at the crux of the matter, which is critical, in the sense of critical thinking. I think that when we deprioritize the ability to think critically, it's much, much easier for the truth to be overlaid with other priorities and interests and fabrications. So it's so important, and we're seeing the effects of the erosion of critical thinking skills in the United States, for example, where I also live. I'm based in New York, making it so much more difficult for people to hold on to the truth that's there. In my book, I also have an examination of reclaiming truth in another way, which is to say, on a very personal level, who are you when other people purport to tell you who you are, or project their expectations or their preconceptions onto you? And what does it take for you to hold on to that sense, while also at the same time challenging yourself and your own self-image and allowing yourself to evolve and expand beyond even the hidebound strictures of what you think you should be, whether that is in concert with other people's perceptions of you or your own sense of who you think you are, who you think you should be. So as you rightfully said, the truth is what it is. And being able to listen deeply and sort of dig to the bottom of all of the soil that's placed on top of it, I think is just a constant challenge for us as humans and as a society, and something that we need to, almost a muscle that we need to keep exercising in order to hold on to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andie. That's the thoughtfulness and the care that these two women bring into the writing of these books. And I'm so happy to be discussing them. And I want to stay with you a little bit. Before I ask you to tell us what the books are about, I'd like us to get a sense of the place. Oop, okay now. If that's a demon or an angel, stay where you are. Let's talk about the place where you and this book were born. So my question to you is, what was Barbados like in the period when you were born? What was it like in the 90s? And what is it like today?
Question. So, well, first an aside, in case there are any Bajans who are going to listen or watch this later, I was actually born in Montserrat, which is an even smaller island. That's a live volcano not far from Barbados, but came to Barbados very young. So for those who are Barbadian truthers, actually technically, I'm Bajan, but I wasn't born there. But I'll talk about Barbados because it's such a fascinating place. You know, it's now it's more well known as the home of Rihanna. But before Rihanna came onto the scene, it's one of the places where, in the so-called New World, where a lot of the experiments in the subjugation of African people were piloted. And the repercussions of that are that, and one of the reasons that it happened in Barbados is that, unlike some of the other islands in the Caribbean, Barbados is topographically flat. So unlike Jamaica with its mountains and caverns, there were no mountains to hide in, or no sort of caves that people could run away to and establish their own identity. We were very much a captive community. And so a lot of those experiments happened in Barbados, and it had a very, very, very cruel and violent history. At one point, the average life expectancy was something like 18. Way back, and this is obviously well past before the time that I was born. But I'm saying it because there's often no divorcing the past from the present, right? And out of that very, very difficult, violent society grew an independence movement that was very determined to just get two things right: educate people, give everyone a quality primary education, and make sure that primary health care was at the peak quality and free and available to all. And so from that day to this, every government in Barbados, the successive governments, regardless of what side of the political spectrum they may be on, those are the two things that Barbadians, as a policy, strive to get right. Make sure everyone has a high quality education, and make sure everyone has access to primary care. This is not very sexy. This is not really about the book, but in answer to the question, I think what it's done is it's really given us a standard, a quality of a life, and an expectation of that standard of life that constantly sees us as one of the few, if not the only, Black countries in the UN's statistics of what counts as very high human development. And it's something that we are proud of, not to lord it over anyone else, but because we know how hard won it was. It was very, very difficult. And when you go to Barbados, one of the things you find is that there's a strong sense of Bajan-ness. There's a sense of our identity. It's rooted in those things. And so, growing up in Barbados, and one of the reasons that I didn't claim it right away is that there's this almost like demarcation of, are you really Barbadian or aren't you? Are both your parents from Barbados or aren't they? So I sort of grew up in that sense of feeling like I had maybe like 9 toes in and 1 toe out because I wasn't really fully there. But it also, at the same time, was a stable society. It was a happy place. It was a place where, you could assume that you were getting, a good quality of education. I grew up, comfortably middle class, more than some, less than others. And, just had a very typical middle class upbringing, I think, for the Caribbean.
And what's it like today?
What's it like today, exactly? So today, I would say that there has been, Barbados was characterized by, a gigantic middle class, a sliver of an upper class, which is where the white Barbadians are concentrated to this day, and then a sliver of a lower class. And what has happened is that middle class has sort of stretched at the poles, especially downwards. So you have a very few people who could live the way that my parents lived, for example. My mom was a secretary, my father was a theologian. You could on that sort of salary, that background, you could raise children comfortably, you could buy a house, you could have a car too. Those days are over in Barbados. And now it's very much it used to be everyone was sort of relatively comfortable. Now it's not even the haves and the have-nots, it's just the scraping by and the have too much. So that inequality and that disparity has grown, and because of that, largely because of that, there's a lot of tension within the society, and a lot of the challenges that I think are perplexing societies all over the world, things like the erosion of fiscal stability for the state, the erosion of the flight of the middle class, an unstable labor market, the rise of the gig economy, all of these things that essentially go to instability and also abetted, of course, by the rise of social media and this overlay of misinformation and disinformation, the lack of critical skills. I mean, all of the things that I thought, quite frankly, we were above. I mean, living in the U.S., I thought, we'd never think this in Barbados. We would know better. No, we don't. We too are very much susceptible to those same forces. So I'm sorry to paint such a bleak picture. And we also have, environmental degradation and erosion. So, beaches and tourism are sort of our claim to fame. And on a bad day, you might, fly all the way to Barbados expecting a beautiful beach and find it covered in sargassum seaweed with a horrible smell. But in case the tourist board is listening, I will also hasten to say that that's very unusual and that I encourage you all to come to Barbados. You'll have a wonderful time. Just know that, like anywhere else, it's not paradise unless we make it paradise. And
Absolutely.
so reclaiming truth is a big part of that, because reclaiming that truth, I think, is a big part of what will make it better. And it doesn't serve us to continue to serve a very few narrow interests that are making money off of hotels, for example, and not thinking about redistributing those gains for everyone. So I hope that's not too political of a response, but it's a place like any other, very much here on Earth with all the same terrestrial problems as anywhere else.
Thank you, Andie. And that's Barbados, so book your tickets. Same question to you, but I want to change it up a little bit. So your book is set in the 90s in Zambia. What did Zambia smell like in the 90s? Smell?
Okay, how many people have been to Lusaka, Zambia? One. Okay. Well, you'll have to book your tickets to Barbados through Lusaka. No, it was I thought it was a big city because I hadn't really traveled. But actually, now in hindsight, I realize it was actually quite a small town, but pretty idyllic in a lot of ways. We didn't have any, like now we have wall fences. There were no wall fences. Everybody had green lawns, lots of jacaranda trees. I don't know if they have jacaranda trees in Lagos, but just beautiful lilac colors, frangipani, bougainvillea everywhere, fruit trees, guavas, mangoes, you name it. And they just grow everywhere. It's like mango season is crazy. And I actually lose my mind because I adore mangoes. And if you read The Lion's Den, you'll see the mango obsession kind of floats a little bit into there. But, the temperature is really good. It's the tropics. It's not too hot. We were talking earlier about Lagos is humid. We don't really have a lot of humidity. So, you grow up. My parents were also middle class. They were both working at the university, but we had access to a great education. And yeah, it smelled, I really vividly remember the smell of sort of dirt road after the rain. It's a very distinct, beautiful smell. And now, sort of just to leapfrog to the present, so much urbanization. The city has grown so much. I think it's, it doesn't sound dramatic if you live in Lagos, but when I was growing up, it was probably about maybe 250,000 people, which we thought was like, wow. And now it's like 1 million, and we're like, wow. And then you travel and you to Lagos, and you're like, okay, maybe it's not so populated.
4 times the population of Barbados.
Right. It's all relative. But you don't get those smells anymore. Now it's like, it's great not to be on bumpy roads all the time. But, you don't get those smells. There's these really high wall fences with, barbed wire and glass. And it just doesn't, concrete everywhere. It just doesn't feel like the warm and welcoming place that I knew and grew up in. So I do kind of miss that, but the reality is, we need to make progress, and it's a double-edged sword. Good things, but not everything is great. But I do try to capture a lot of the beauty. The story is a little on the darker side, but there's a lot of incredible things about the countries. And I use that definitely as a backdrop, and have a lot of nostalgia since I don't live in Lusaka anymore, but just really wanted to show that and share that with the world. So I hope if you haven't been to Lusaka, you'll be willing to take a little journey through a book. That's one thing that I always loved growing up, because as I mentioned, I didn't travel a lot. The only thing we used to do is go to Tanzania by train, because it was like a 3-day trip. We were kids, so we thought this was wonderful. Now I'm like, oh my God, what a nightmare. You couldn't pay me to do that. But through books, I could go everywhere, including to Nigeria. What a wonderful legacy Nigeria has of all these incredible authors who inspired many, many of us to try our best to, put pen to paper, or now we're talking about computer screens.
Thank you. Let's shift and talk about your books. And because many of you haven't read the books, and the reason I asked that question is because both these books do a beautiful thing of expecting you to arrive at the first page knowing about these countries. There's no anthropology, they don't explain, they're like, do your research and then come. And I actually had to stop the book, get to know my bearing, and then come back, which I think you both did absolutely well, which is why I was helping you guys by getting a bit of context about, yes, so you're welcome. So Iris, yes, you're welcome. Tell us a little bit about The Lion's Den, and then if you could also give us a taste and read an excerpt about Mrs. Njavwa, who is my favorite character. So tell us about the book.
Okay, great. So it's a legal thriller set in, as you said, Wanjiru, the late 80s, early 90s. And there are 2 protagonists. So I can't tell you too much, because otherwise, I want you to, I don't even know what the price is, but I want you to spend some of your naira on the book. So the lead is a lawyer. I started my career as a lawyer. She is very, very fierce. She's very determined to do the right thing. She's just out of law school. She's a rookie. She just really believes in right and wrong and sees law and justice as one of the same thing. And through the book, her journey is really understanding and learning that law and justice are sometimes related, but it's certainly not the same. She must navigate through all these different systems to protect her client, who is the other protagonist in the book. And so her client, Bessie Mulenga, is a young queer teenager who gets thrown into prison in Zambia, and I think it's the same in Nigeria as well. Same-sex relations are criminalized, and so Bessie has been imprisoned. Grace Zulu, the lawyer, goes to interview her client. She meets her client once, and then her client disappears. And the rest of the story is Grace's quest to find out what happened to Bessie, but also to try and get justice. And so she must navigate not just the legal system, she must navigate communities, she must navigate religious, I guess, ideas and ideology, corruption, police. I mean, there's quite a lot in this, but through it to the end, she really has to go to the end of the earth. And talking, as we were talking about earlier on, the need for all of us to be courageous. Grace is indeed a very, very courageous character, because no matter what obstacle she faces, she has to find a way over, around, through. And she's not a person of privilege. She comes from a very poor background. So she's a rural, she was growing up a rural who struggled mightily to get her education and then to become a lawyer. And she really thinks she's arrived, and then she begins to understand pretty quickly that this is just the beginning of her journey and not the end.
Wonderful. And one of my favorite characters in your book is Mrs. Javo, who we're about to meet. And she's one of the women who I think carry not just a story, but carry grace. So I'll invite you shortly to read the excerpt where we get to meet her and know her background. But I also gave both our writers homework earlier, because I'm that kind of moderator. And I asked them who would play the leads in a film about their books, based on their books. And I asked them to scan the audience over the next hour. And at the end of the panel, they will pick out two women who they would cast based on just physical to play the role of Grace and to play the role of Sabri. So they may or may not be a prize. I need to ask Lola what prize we can give these cast members, but just reminding you guys to be scanning the audience. Let's meet this incredible woman.
Okay, so Mrs. Njavwa is Grace's landlady, but she has her own history. She is a freedom fighter who fought for independence. And as many, many women, I think all over Africa, they laid their lives on the line, but when independence came, they were forgotten. So here's a little bit about Mrs. Njavwa. Apropos or not, Mrs. Njavwa started almost every story about her youth with, "Did you know I was a freedom fighter?" It was just before independence, and me and the gang, as we called ourselves, met in Father Sebastian's office. KK, so that's Kenneth Kaunda, who was the first president of Zambia. KK was going to announce his first cabinet, and you can't imagine how excited we were. Independence was set for October 24th, 1964, and all our dreams were about to come true. We waited and waited until KK finally arrived. I remember he was wearing a Chairman Mao suit, and he looked so handsome and presidential. He acted like it too, not even greeting us properly, just waving his white handkerchief at us. Mrs. Njavwa imitated a royal wave. Then he started announcing his cabinet. First it was Reuben for vice president, then Mwanza and Sikota, and so on and so forth. And we all cheered and clapped until he finished making his appointments. Everyone in the gang had a cabinet post except me. Even a white man, Mr. Skinner, who wasn't even part of the gang. He was appointed Minister of Justice, but not me and not a single woman. When we realized that all the positions were filled and I had been left out, there was a stunned silence. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, at least until I lost it. After all I had done for the struggle and everything I sacrificed, I had nothing to show for it but this big gash in my head. How furious I was that day, and I really let him have it right there and then in front of everyone. That must have been something to see, Grace said. Oh, yes. Father Sebastian said I was like a spitting cobra, Mrs. Njavwa hissed at Grace. But do you know what happened next? Grace shook her head. From that day onward, I was out in the cold. And it wasn't just KK. It was all of them. They wouldn't meet me or take my calls. We had been so close and made so many plans together. We thought things would be better for the next generation. For you girls, I was betrayed by all of them.
that really resonated because there's so many women that were part of the struggle for all of our liberations in our specific country. I think of the Mau Mau women who were detained, and we always hear about the men in the forest, but never about the women who fought. And I wanted to take this moment to highlight any other Zambian women who fought for the liberation, like Mrs. Njavwa, and haven't gotten their flowers. At Ake, we're gonna give them their flowers today. So who do you wanna shout out?
I love that. I will name 3 that I know, but we all know there's so many that were never in any history book, not in oral tradition. And Mrs. Njavwa, although fictional, does represent so many. So for Zambia, there was a woman called Julia Chikamoneka, Chibesa Kankasa, and Nakatindi Bayeta. So those are 3 who were known, but we know independence didn't come just because of Kaunda. And actually, all these people that I mentioned, these were real people, and these were the real cabinet members of the first cabinet of Zambia.
Thank you. Thank you. And we give them their flowers. Let's travel over to Barbados. Tell us a little bit about your book, and then please read that delicious excerpt we discussed.
Happy to. So, again, locating this in the realm of the personal, which of course is always political, Let Me Liberate You is the story of an artist, a Barbadian artist who leaves Barbados at a very young age and moves to New York after a traumatic incident where she loses her father. And she grows up in New York for about the next 20 years. And just as she's about to become really well known as an artist, she starts to develop an acute case of imposter syndrome, which is something that perhaps other artists in the room might be able to relate to. In her case, it's not just that she doesn't know or believe that she deserves the attention. It's a little bit more complicated than that. This is a person who is very dark-skinned, very tall, and because of a case of childhood alopecia, she happens to be completely bald and hairless. So that affect gives her a sort of exotic Amazonian look in the eyes of the New York art world. It makes them think of her almost like a Grace Jones type of character. And so again, going back to what I was saying about who you are versus who people want to project onto you, she is assumed to be a brilliant artist and an iconoclast and, just all kinds of things that have solely to do with her look. And again, in this age of Instagram, the fact that she's highly Instagrammable also adds to her fame. And the upshot of all this is that she starts to feel quite commodified as a person, not just her art, not just her product, but she herself. And so she's not really sure whether she's being embraced or whether she's simply being used. And so when the book begins, she's sitting in an interview with the New York Times. It's a group interview with other artists. And everyone's sort of playing their part. They're doing the artist thing. And she feels very uncomfortable. And so before the interview is complete, her mind is wandering, and she's remembering that the last time she felt truly seen and assessed fairly was when she was a child back in Barbados. And so very, very abruptly, she gets up out of the interview and just goes straight to the airport, and gets in a plane, and goes to Barbados with just the vaguest sense of wanting to find herself when she gets there. And I won't spoil too much, but I'll just say that through a series of poorly thought out decisions, she ends up setting off a workers' revolt in the whole island that brings the whole place to its knees. She becomes the leader of a movement that she didn't quite expect to lead, but it's too late because she's leading it now. And ultimately, the book is a sort of satire of the dynamics of class, race, complexion, returning nationals versus locals. There are all kinds of sort of front lines, fault lines at play there that she is sort of unclenching just in one person and, one, as I said, series of ill-conceived choices. So when the book opens, or the excerpt that I'm going to read to you now happens when her cousin goes to pick her up at the airport. Now, when she goes back to Barbados, I should just say, this will probably help this make sense, the The cousin and the aunt that she goes to stay with are very, very wealthy. Her aunt is sort of a very wealthy, high-powered lawyer and socialite, and her daughter has grown up with immense privilege in a way that she hasn't been able to in New York. But because she is from New York and she's a recognized artist in New York, that has conferred on her a certain prestige that the aunt and the niece are just very eager to bask in. So I'll start with that context. Brantley Adams International Airport was the usual hive of inertia it became whenever a large jet was due in. People sauntered into the arrivals area like cowboys entering a saloon, exchanging terse nods and angling for the best positions to stand and wait for passengers. Jingling keys, scrolling phones, checking watches by the half minute, and shifting from flip to flop, they took in the scene around them, a scene rewarding to the well-trained eye. For those who live in a big place, an airport holds limited thrill. But in a small place, it is the downbeat of a pulse, the reassuring prelude to one's blip on the radar screen. Small place people tend to keep their antenna raised to catch the signal, convinced that the world is happening somewhere else. A single sweeping gaze is as good as an hour's observation if one knows what to look for, as Bajans do. A simple technique allows them to calculate with molecular precision the general decency of a crowd and their own place within it. This is key to determining how one should behave, how one should stand, which muscles to clench and which ones to relax, the appropriate range of swivel in one's neck, when and on whom to let one's gaze fall. In any setting, this technique is second nature to a Bajan, though anyone with enough will and perseverance can master it too. First, survey the landscape using a melanometer. Those not issued a melanometer at birth, as most Bajans are, have to develop one through practice. Like a photographer's light meter, which calculates the ratio of light to shadow, the melanometer measures the collective melanin content of a crowd and calculates the average tonal factor, the ATF. This ATF can be any point along the spectrum of complexion from barley water white to coal cinder black, a spectrum encompassing such permutations as light, fair, clear, clammy cherry, gooseberry, ginger, spoil yam, sapodilla, olive, yellow, red, weak tea, high brown, musky, dusky, Milo, and brown. Though the melanometer can be thrown off in the presence of British tourists who tend to overexpose in the heat, it is essential that its first reading be trusted before the eyes have the chance to adjust. This will serve as the baseline. Now, if the ATF reads gooseberry or darker, adjust it according to the presence of the following: late model phones, lighter; raffia baskets, darker; loud conversations with much gesticulation in European sounding languages, lighter; in local dialect, darker; eating from a greasy paper bag with visible napkin, lighter; without, darker; gold; rings, lighter; teeth, darker. Lastly, fine-tune your reading based on the following criteria: recognition of faces, accuracy of past readings, gut reaction, appraisal of own decency, faith in value of exercise. With practice, all this occurs in a fraction of a second, down in the folds of the subconscious, resulting in a final crowd decency rating on, say, a scale of 1, darkest, lowest, to 10, lightest, highest. It is wondrous in its subtlety, like breathing or swallowing, a complex exercise one learns to perform without thinking.
Round of applause, please. The satire, the tone, the pace of the book, and just how it varies is really special. Let's read this room quickly. How would this room, what, on the melanometer, how would these guys do?
Well, let me start with my lack of faith in the value of the exercise. But I think we come in at a respectable ATF of maybe 8. Let's go with 8. Yeah?
I
Do we
agree. I agree. Staying with the book a little bit, and with you specifically, Andie, Auntie Aggie is somebody who I think is a perfect response to Mrs. Njavwa in Lion's Den. Well, Mrs. Njavwa has kind of built her power through the struggle for political liberation. For Auntie Aggie, it's really about like political and social climbing that has given her this power. And she really, like Sabri, really triggered me and reminds me of my aunties, my mom, the women in my life who are older. And I wondered, when Auntie Aggie goes to sleep at night, does she think she's a hero of the story?
I think she's the hero of her own story.
Of her own story?
I think so. So Auntie Aggie, who, as I said, is this well-to-do socialite, is an interesting character because, unlike her daughter, she is one generation away from the kind of poverty that she now scorns and looks down upon. And because of that, she's even more invested in maintaining her place, the place that she has attained. You learn in the course of the book that she's the youngest of 4 sisters, and this is very, very loosely based on my grandmother and her siblings, although my grandmother is not this person. She looked at her older sisters and the choices they made, the men that they married, and the very real repercussions that had for their lives and their prospects. And she became even more selective. As it says in the book, her own father would not have been someone that she would have considered worthy. And so because of that, I think she thinks of herself as someone who had to make very careful choices, has made those choices, and is now enjoying the fruits of that discernment. And so I don't think she might not think of herself as a hero, but she certainly thinks of other people as perhaps less discerning, perhaps less worthy. So it's not that I am the best, it's that everyone else is worse. Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, she definitely gives off that energy. And this is a debut novel for the both of you. A little bit about the process of getting the books out. So Iris, I'll start with you. What has surprised you the most and the least about the journey to getting The Lion's Den out to market?
Well, I think, I think there are a lot of creatives in the room. Depending on if you're a singer or an actor, actress, you are very much in the performance space. However, if you are a writer, what you like to do is be in dark places by yourself writing. And so, you hand the book to your publisher and you're like, oh, after all the editing, you're like, we're done, yay. And then they give it back to you and they say, go and sell it. You're like, what do you mean? They're like, well, go out. They're like, well, aren't you on Instagram? I was like, not really. I was like, LinkedIn? They're like, oh my God, we have a problem here. So I think that's the thing, which is a reality now. Maybe even 10 years ago, the publishing houses did a lot more, but now the expectation is you're going to do it. And I think that is a double-edged sword, because now there's an opportunity to get the word out directly in a way that you want to. But the flip side is, being very introverted and liking to be, kind of in your sweats at home is probably not the best way to sell books. So I think that's been a real education for me. And hopefully I'm getting a little bit better at it. But it's, I wasn't expecting that. I thought once I had sold the book, I had arrived and I was done. And kind of like Grace, the character, it's actually just the beginning of the journey.
That was a big one for me as well when my first book came out. I was just like, I've been thinking about this thing for 8 years, and now I have to talk about it to everyone. What about you, Andie? What surprised you the most or the least?
On that note, I was going to say, I used to come to festivals like this and look at the writers on stage and think, oh my God, I could never do that. Yeah, and I even had this, I had a whole world built out where I would hire an impersonator to go up as me and then have them wear an earpiece and just recite the answers. But actually, one of the things that's been surprising is how much I enjoy these conversations, because I'm not talking about myself really. We're talking about the book, we're talking about the ideas, and hearing great questions. So that's been really enjoyable. With respect to the book's journey, one of the things that I was a little bit dismayed by is the sort of reluctance that I encountered to a book that was not trauma-centered. There was a Black novel that wasn't trauma-centered. And, my book was published in the United States. And there, I think, I can't speak for the market here in Nigeria, but there's definitely a strong predilection for books where Black people suffer. Whether you're suffering nobly, whether you're triumphing over adversity, there's always an expectation. And I'm not talking about just standard conflict. I mean, there's conflict in every story, but there's a sense that if you're Black, there may be a half dozen acceptable ways for you to suffer. And when I was able to find a publisher for the book, my agent, a white woman, who has, been in the business for a long time, burst into tears and said to me, "You don't know how many editors have told me, and I've been keeping this from you, Black people don't read satire. Black people don't get satire. We don't understand what the stakes are." There's such a paucity of expectation for Black audiences and for Black stories, starting with the expectation that only Black people read Black stories, as if we are not capable of reading all stories and that all stories don't contain universality, or that we cannot convey universality through stories that are Black-centered. I mean, there are all kinds of problems with that proposition, but apparently I was coming up against that, unbeknownst to me, quite a bit. But I've been determined, and I think, at least for the foreseeable future, this will be my lane. I think that we have such a breadth of fascinating tales to tell that aren't all grounded in having a police boot on our necks, that aren't always about heinous violent abuse, notwithstanding that those are stories that are very important to be told, but there's an entire spectrum of stories that I think Black people, especially from the diaspora, were not always allowed to tell. And I really wanted to tell a story where the stakes were significant and substantial, but they weren't existential. And so I think finding my way through that torturous process to finding someone who believed in it enough to give it a chance, that was one of the things that surprised me. It took a very long time to actually find the right home for this book, but I think it was important to stick to one's guns if there's a story one wants to tell. Yeah.
I'm gonna start the Q&A in 2 minutes. I've borrowed 5 minutes from your Q&A. I'm sorry, it's not really. But I wanna stay with you, Andie, and talk a little bit about Sabri. Have I said her name right? Sabri, I have. She, again, lead character, carries this book on her shoulders, but also decides to carry many things she shouldn't. And we've already said that she kind of starts an accidental revolution, and she reminds me of kind of the point when activism becomes personal. When do you separate that line between when the movement becomes about the movement and it becomes you, and it happens so subtly for Sabri? And when do you think that line is crossed? When does activism stop becoming about the cause and starts becoming about the person?
Such a great question. I think that a lot of the best and most effective activists are almost reluctant activists, right? Mm-hmm. Not the people who sort of lunge for the glory or the compulsion to lead, but who really see a wrong that, first of all, may affect them personally or affect those that they love, and they just go for that. They lunge at that. So sort of accidental activists who sort of stumble into it and eventually follow the momentum of this thing that they've been building, I think those are the best. I will have to say that you might be giving Sabri too much credit because I think she came in simply wanting to be seen and finding a sense of purpose. And what she performs in the book is quite arguably a case of more performative activism. As she has a bit of a savior complex. It's all, sort of duly mocked in the book. But I don't think that anyone would look at her and see and see in her behaviors and her choices an effective activist. The virtue of that, however, is that it's left to those who truly believe in the movement to take the agency and take the reins of it and turn it into something that's valuable and meaningful. And that's where, well, you'll have to read and see, but that's hopefully where, the story ends up for them.
Thank you. Okay, have you guys been scanning the room for your protagonist? Questions? Any questions for incredible authors? We have 1, 2, 3. Okay, we'll take those 3 first. So 2 over here and 1 in the purple over there.
Thank you so much for that session. My question is to Iris. I read a part of your book. I'm not done with it. And then I was reading it and I've just been thinking, homosexuality is still criminalized in Zambia. How then was the reception in Zambia when you wrote this book? How was the launch? Were you able to launch this book in Zambia? And if you were in Zambia, would you have written this book? Also, if homosexuality is still criminalized. I'm sorry. If it's still criminalized, how then do we get this book to the people in Zambia? Thank you.
Well, thank you for those great questions. It's been a real challenge and honestly a heartbreak in Zambia. I think for most authors, doing well in your own home is really important, not just for marketing, but just for your own gratification that this work is meaningful to somebody. And, Zambia has really been difficult. I've actually not had a formal launch in Zambia. All other places I've been, I've had launches, and it's been very easy and straightforward. Zambia has been quite thorny. Ultimately, I was going to just host one myself and do it. Due to some family, unfortunately, we had a funeral in the family, so it didn't happen. But I've literally had to fight. I have the bookstore, the procurement officer's number on my phone, and I text her all the time to say, please. So I had to basically beg for a bookstore to have the book, so it's available. And then people will usually send me a message to say, oh, the book is sold out, I haven't been able to get it. So it's been a struggle, and I think it's just a challenge that I will continue to face and have to figure out better ways to get the book sold in Zambia. Having said that, I did have a meeting with the LGBTQ plus community in Zambia. Now, I think for the one person who's been to Zambia, it feels like a very laid-back, relaxed place and space, and it is in a lot of ways. But in this one particular regard, the conservatism, especially the religious conservatism, the homophobia is very, very strong and very extreme. And so this meeting was the first time in my life that I've had a clandestine meeting. No phones, no last names, just meeting with the community and talking about my book. And that was very gratifying because a lot of the people who came said they felt seen, they felt heard, they saw that their struggle is being recognized by somebody outside of the community specifically, and using whatever little platform I have as an author to showcase that it is really, of course, it's discrimination, but what the impact of that discrimination is on people's real lives and how it really tears apart a community and the fabric of the society. And so in the book, with Bessie disappearance, what that does to his mother and his family. The mother is very religious, by the way, but this is about losing your son. Your son disappears, and the mental and emotional anguish she goes through. So it's been both. So that moment with the community felt really, really great. But other than that, it's been quite difficult. And I know places like Nigeria is conservative as well. And so it's a little bit baffling that I've still been able to have a good reception in Nigeria and not in my own home country. So not done yet. I'm going to keep on trying. And I did have an event at the Zambian embassy just a few weeks ago. So I feel like, I think we were talking about it a little bit. And I think somebody in the audience was mentioning that sometimes if you do well outside, it kind of forces some sort of recognition inside. So I have to keep doing well outside to push this. But it makes me tremendously grateful, particularly to be here in Nigeria, because I see so many parallels and the reception has been quite different. So yes, thanks.
Wonderful. Please buy her book so she can do well elsewhere and then do well at home. Let's take the next two questions before we answer them, just so we can be effective with our last 10 minutes.
Thank you, ladies, for a very wonderful session. I have two questions for Iris and Andie. Each.
One.
It's one. For Iris, you talked about the landlady, right? And we say we forget the women heroes who fought for independence. In the current government right now, has there been any, not even the government, the country itself, has there been an awakening where the women are appreciated for the fight for freedom? Because that's a really big deal. And my question to Andie is the ATF, did you research it, or you just woke up and said this is what it's gonna be? Because unfortunately that's what's happening right now. But I just need to understand the thought process of that, because you may have gone deep down the hole, and did you come back alive, or yeah. Thank you,
Marianne. Let's get the other question from the side of the room. So recognition of women freedom fighters and ATF.
Hi, Iris. Hi, Andie. So, Iris, I'm just a bit curious. This morning I was reading your book, and I was at that point when Grace realized that Bess was dead. So, and all of this happened after an epileptic seizure. So, I'm just fascinated. So I'm just fascinated. Does this have some form of cultural context to it, or was this just a symbolic event that you put in for shock value? Just tell me the thought process behind it, or is this something related to your culture that you put in there? And then Andie, I think I love you. Yeah, I love your fire, and I decided that I'm going to get your book. I haven't read it right after this session.
Okay. Join the pre-order list. There's going to be a list at the bookstore. Write your name down if you want a limited number of, there's very few left, and they're coming on Friday. We may not have time for more questions. Let's take those ones, and then we'll see how we're doing for time.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think women's rights have come a long way. The current vice president now in Zambia is a woman. However, the patriarchy is still very strong. And so you see over time, it's sort of up and it's down. And I think things have changed because of women themselves. They have continued to push, they've continued to fight, they've continued to insist and identify where they have been excluded. So I, give credit to women and women's movements and organizations for really pushing for change. Having said that, as I said, the patriarchy is still strong, and one of the things that I really appreciate more and more is how women manage to operate despite oppressive systems. And so many of the characters in the book, the women are there, and oftentimes they can be quite quiet, but they're always finding a way. We are like water. We will find a way. We will go around the rock over. We will find a way, but it can be slow. It can be painful, and sometimes, you're kind of in a whirlpool, and it feels like you're not going forward. And I feel like right now we're in a bit of a whirlpool moment, but we have to continue. And I think this is the wonderful thing about history. If we go back, we can see how far we've come, and we can eye the horizon and see how far we still need to go. So shall I let you answer, and then I'll come back to the other question?
The ATF, so the melanometer, this is something that I think every society that has been touched by white supremacy can experience, right? And Barbados is no exception. The actual satire for it came from, I'll tell you very quickly because I see our time is limited. I was in Barbados visiting, and one Saturday night decided to go out with a friend of mine who lives in Barbados full time. And we had a choice between, two different parties to go to. So we sort of pull up near the first one, and outside we see people standing around, they're drinking, they're laughing, And my friend says, "Oh, no, we can't go there. That's a rough crowd. That's a rough crowd." I said, "Okay, maybe she knows something I don't know." So we drive on, we go to the other party, and we see people standing around, they're drinking, they're laughing, they're having a good time. She says, "Oh, this one's fine." And the only difference between the two was the general shade of the general complexion of the crowd. One crowd was lighter, generally speaking, one was darker. It wasn't that she said, "I know this person," or "that person's a troublemaker." And I found it so fascinating that she made this choice just almost reflexively, right? Just looking at it and assuming all kinds of things based on the degree of melanin in the crowd. And that happens all the time. I when my grandmother was alive, I would spend all day at the beach, and she would come back and say, "Oh, your mother gave you that nice brown color, you blackened it up." This kind of thing, as if it's a bad thing to be darker, and not even realizing the implications of what you're saying. So, I think the melanometer was just an outgrowth of that. And it's interesting that when I read that passage in different environments, I've had a launch in Barbados, Canada, wherever you go, Black people get it because all of us have been reckoning with this concept of just the sort of reflexive assumptions that are made based on the darkness of one's complexion. So it's no more simple or complicated than that.
Okay. Very quickly for the last question, and then we don't even have, no more time for questions. We have 3 minutes, and I need to cede 2 of them to Lola. Please, you can answer the last
I'll answer your
question.
question very quickly. I think it speaks to a little bit about what you were talking about, Andie, which is the colonial legacies. And religion is a colonial legacy versus spirituality and things like ancestral recognition, ancestral worship. And, the character Father Sebastian, who is a white priest, he is very quick to dismiss any kind of spirituality. That is not rooted in Catholicism. He's a Catholic priest. However, for Grace, she really wrestles with it because she's like, well, either you believe in the spirit world or you don't. But don't tell me that my ancestors, and she feels very connected to her ancestors, don't tell me that's wrong. But the Holy Spirit, for some reason, is right.
Oh, thank you. As we close, we just discovered sitting here today that you two live around the corner from each other or something in the US?
We had to come to Lagos to find each
To
other.
find each other.
That we're neighbors.
Close, yes.
So born in Zambia, born in Barbados, and live in the US, and we have the US Embassy in the room, and I'm going to invite Lola to invite them on. Thank you. My name is Wanjiru Koinange. Thank you for your attention.
Wanjiru Koinange, the author of Havoc of Choice. The applause wasn't very archaic. Can we do one more? Thank you. So very, very quickly, my very good friend and the public affairs officer of the U.S. Embassy is here, and she would like to say something very quickly because you have 2 people here who have U.S. passports. They've come to claim their own. See? There you go.
Now, don't go anywhere. I just wanted to say a few words on behalf of the U.S. mission. We are so proud to support the Ake Arts and Book Festival. We love working with Lola. We are so glad it's an international festival. And we partner with Book Buzz Foundation on Isheda, which is a cultural series that happens monthly. So thank you for all that you're doing. I'm going to buy both of these books. And last year I left with maybe 12, so I need to be careful. Thank you.
You can live with 15 this year.
Even 20.
15. 20?
Even 20.
Anybody for 25? 25 books this year. Thank you so much, Julie. Please...
Can I have my last minute and 20 so we can pick the
have
actresses?
your last minute.
Okay, so who are the protagonists? Who would play Grace and who would play Savory?
Okay, so Grace is very tall, very beautiful. Everyone's sitting down, so I couldn't. There were so many graces in the audience.
Are you
but-
tall? Are you beautiful?
But yes, so so I think if you're tall and beautiful, you could claim your graceness or gracefulness. But I will say the person that I did see who just looked like Grace and just was very stunning. She's wearing like a black braids, black top, yes.
Yeah. Please stand up so we can see you. Sorry to put you on the spot. I agree. You are giving grace. Okay. What about you, Andy?
And this is a little bit harder because there's no one who's bald, which is a very keen.
Where's Wana?
Oh, let's see. There's my Sabri. There she is. Yes. Talk to me after the show.
Yes, see us behind the tent after this, our actresses. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your festival.
But may I ask, can we just do a quick video just for my Insta? Can you go and tell me? Thank you. Okay. What do you want us to see? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay.